Hello and welcome to Will Watches. This is my spoiler-free review for Spider-Man No Way Home. So this review will be spoiler-free, but I will talk about things that are in the trailers. So if you want to go in completely blind, this isn't really the place for that. I'm going to talk about characters that are in the trailers. If you've seen the trailers, you know who I'm talking about. So I'll talk about some trailer-based stuff in here as well. It's not 100% spoiler-free, I guess. So right off the bat, this film, it feels like an event, very much in the same way that Endgame did. You know, there's a lot of hype around this. There's people clapping, people cheering, people crying in the movie. It's the biggest feeling movie as an event that has come out since COVID, basically. And that comes with a lot of pros, but it comes with a lot of cons as well. You know, there's a lot of hype here, but it's very much in this vein of Avengers Endgame, where there's a lot of hype and it kind of gives you everything you want with all of that hype, but it also, as a movie, kind of structurally, it doesn't hold up as well as a consequence of that. You know, some of the pacing can be a bit off, and it is like a little bit messy, I guess. I think I wasn't that convinced by the first half. There's a lot of stuff happening and it was happening quite quick, and I just wasn't really sure where it was going, but I actually kind of did a 180 on that when the film got about an hour in, maybe 40 minutes in. There's this specific fight with Green Goblin, and after that I was kind of all in. Like before I was thinking, this isn't that great, but then after that moment I kind of just got fully immersed into the story, I guess, and just let the hype kind of ride me through the movie. So of course we have these multiversal villains that are all coming through. Obviously there's Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Electro, Sandman, Lizard, that we've all seen from the trailers. And I think out of all of them, Norman Osborn, Green Goblin, he is probably the strongest, as in, like, from a writing perspective, he was my favourite out of all of them. He has the most to do here. I feel like the film, I was worried that it could ruin some of these characters' arcs, and I don't think it does really. You know, at some points Doc Ock does feel like a bit of a caricature of himself, but that is kind of addressed and fixed in the movie, not to spoil anything too much. So it doesn't feel like it ruins any of the moments for the characters for me. They all feel like themselves in this. They're not just here to be this marketing gimmick. So Tom Holland has said that this is the darkest MCU movie. I can't remember if he said it was the darkest MCU or the darkest Spider-Man, but I definitely agree with him. This is the darkest out of his three movies, both visually and thematically. You know, there's quite a lot of this movie where it was like shot at nighttime and things, and it's actually quite dark and kind of hard to see what's happening a bit. But then thematically as well, Peter Parker goes through quite a dark arc in this, and it's quite cool to see this kind of other side to him as well. The character's just that tiny bit darker. Obviously, it's not like DC levels, gritty, realistic darkness, but it is still cool to see a slightly darker side to this MCU Spider-Man. In terms of kind of CGI, I feel like it handles most of it well. I think some of the de-aging, especially on Alfred Molina, you can kind of tell, but it's not too bad. You know, I just think some of the action, it's quite hard to follow. I don't think that's a fault of bad CGI. I think it's just a bit of shaky cam, and sometimes it's just hard to see exactly what's happening and to understand exactly what's happening. And I feel like that might also be a consequence of them trying to keep so much of this movie a secret. They probably filmed a lot of this on green screen sets in very secretive locations, rather than filming on location and things like that. So that's probably why some of the action is a bit hard to follow, just because there's so much secrecy around this movie that they're trying to keep, you know? I think this movie is also the most emotional of all the Spider-Man movies, of the MCU ones. As I said, Tom's arc in this is very dark, and there's some really great moments here. There's just like a lot of emotional highs and a lot of emotional lows. However, it does feel like part of this movie, especially the ending, you know, if you know about everything that's happening with Sony and Spider-Man, you can see why they make certain decisions in the movie, and you're like, oh, the reason they've done this is because Sony wants this to happen, and things like that. I think the MCU works best when the creators have this creative control. I think they learned that lesson from Ant-Man and Edgar Wright, and then they gave Taika Waititi and James Gunn loads of creative control, and you can kind of see some studio interference here, especially with the ending. I won't give away what it is, obviously, but it does feel like Sony wanted this ending so they can do their thing with all of their movies as well, because they have the Venom ones and Morbius, and they're probably planning this whole slew of movies. So the ending does feel like it's something that Sony wanted to happen. One thing I'm glad this movie did, it kind of broke away from some of the tropes of the previous two Spider-Man movies. The whole kind of Tom needing a mentor, they kind of shed that a bit. There is a little bit of that in here, but it's not as in your face as the others. And it just works a bit better here. It feels a bit more unique than the last two. And this definitely does feel like it kind of wraps up this little trilogy that they've got going here. I know there's going to be even more, but it seems like this is its own kind of set of movies, and then the next ones are kind of going to be their own thing. It does feel like there's kind of a definite transition, that this is the end of this arc for Spider-Man, and they're going to be starting a new arc for him eventually with all of these new films that they're going to be making. I don't know what's going on with those films, if they are part of the MCU, right? Because I know there's been a lot of conflict between Sony and Marvel, but I think they're still going to be part of the MCU. It's not going to be Sony just having full creative control over those, I don't think. I think what this movie does really well is the message, the kind of core message. It's more about saving people. It's a superhero movie, so of course it's about saving people. That's what heroes do. But it's about kind of saving them from themselves, saving people's hearts, and it's kind of about rehabilitation for some of these villains. I just think that's a really strong message for this superhero movie to have. So overall, it's really enjoyable. I think from a fan perspective, you're getting everything that you want. But from a kind of movie criticism perspective, it can be a bit weak in kind of the way it's structured. It's very much an event movie, much like Endgame and these other big Marvel movies. This is definitely like the biggest feeling Marvel movie we've had since Endgame. This feels like a proper event. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, consider leaving a like or a comment. If you really loved it, be sure to subscribe to keep up to date for all of the future uploads. A spoiler-filled review will be up basically at the same time as this. So yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.